Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to NRW. I'm your host today, Rob, the movie guy, and I thank you very much for joining me here today. And today, the film I'm reviewing is Boogie, and this was a film that came out in theaters this month on March 5th, and on March 26th, it was available on digital platforms, so I was able to rent it on Amazon Prime today, and I just got done watching the film, and I actually enjoyed the movie a great deal. And the film was written and directed by Huang, who's making his directorial debut, and many people may know him from his work with the autobiography that he wrote called Fresh Off the Boat, which was then turned into a TV show on ABC. And he has also been hosting some TV shows on the Cooking Channel as well as on Viceland, and he had also owned some pretty well-established restaurants. And Eddie has said in an interview that he had this idea for the film since he was 17 after he had seen the movie Good Will Hunting, and although he said that he had nothing in common with Ben Affleck or Matt Damon, but he did understand the character's pain in the movie, and he felt like he wanted to make a film like that, so that way when a kid like him had seen this movie, that he would hope that it would help them feel less alien. And the plot of this movie follows a story of Alfred Chin, who in the film goes by the name of Boogie, and he's aspiring to become an NBA player, and he has the support of his father, and he's doing everything in his power to help his son achieve those goals, whereas his mother, on the other hand, is putting a lot of pressure on her son to use his athletic abilities to get a scholarship and then go to a really good school. And he definitely has a bit of a conflict with both his parents because they are traditional East Asians who are instilling into him the traditional values that they've grown up with here, but at the same time, he is questioning their approach on motivating him to achieve these goals that they have for him and that he also has for himself. So he's learning to figure things out on what is going to be best for him and also looking out for his family as well. And along the way, he falls in love with a girl, I meant to say, at his school. And he also has a side plot that involves another ball player at another high school that is being built up for this massive game that's supposed to be happening towards the end of this movie. And at the same time, there are other recruiters from these colleges that are looking out for some really good potential players to join their school. And there is a bit of a problem along the way where some of these recruiters are wanting him to play at their school, but they're not offering any scholarship for him because of even though he can play very well, but he has a bit of a problem being a team player, not really helping out the team, just really more playing for himself. And they pick that up along the way when they see him play. So there's that issue there as well. And there's other things that happen in the film that I was debating on whether or not if I should get into, because after I had watched the movie, I had realized that there were certain things that occur in the film that I think is best that I do not mention at all, because as the story starts to unfold, the motivations for a lot of these decisions that are being made by these characters, whether you agree with them or not, it can sometimes be very questionable, and at least it kept me very engaged to understand the motivations and understand the situation that they're in and the decisions that were made as a result of that. And if I give you all that information, I feel like it may take away from at least the enjoyment factor as you discover what's unfolding along the way. And I think it's best that I don't mention that at all. So that's really going to be the extent of the plot synopsis that I'm going to be giving here, because I think you should just watch the film, not knowing too much about it, and see how things unfold along the way, because I think that's the best way to watch this movie. So then from there, I'm just going to go and get into my positives, and then I'm going to be getting into my negative. The first positive I want to point out is in the director, Eddie Huang, who I think did a really good job with the script writing as well as directing duties. And considering that this is his first time writing and directing, he did a phenomenal job with that. And you can clearly tell this is a passion project for him, and you can also see the influence that Good Will Hunting had on him to help make this movie, because they have some similar beats to it, although it's not the same type of film, but you can see the similarities and with the way he's approaching to tell this story, and I think he did it effectively. And the actors in this movie do a really good job with their performances, especially Taylor Takahashi, who plays Boogie in the film. And considering that this is his first time acting ever, if I read correctly, having the leading role in a major production, you wouldn't have been able to tell, because he does a really good job in showcasing a lot of these dramatic beats that's required for this film. As far as the athletic side of it, he's been playing basketball if I heard correctly, his whole life, so that part's already been covered. And I understand that Eddie Huang was looking for somebody for a very long time to play this part, but to not only just showcase their basketball skills, to perform it at a high level, which Taylor did have, but also to showcase the dramatic beats that's required for this character, because there's a lot of baggage this character has to carry. And I think Taylor does a good job in portraying that with this character in Boogie. And the complexities he has with the relationship he has with his parents is also another standout moment for me in the film, because you can see that the relationship that he has with his father is a very loving relationship, I meant to say, where his father listens to him. His father gives him really good advice and educates him as well too, especially about Chinese American history. And you can see that Boogie respects his father and really admires him as well. Whereas with his mother, he doesn't necessarily feel that love from her. He questions her motivation with her encouragement on pushing him to find a better route to get a scholarship, go to a great school, to better himself. But the way that she does that and the way she showcases her love, he just does not appreciate that set of motivations for her to push that on him. And he definitely does question her and challenges her in a lot of ways. And these traditional Chinese values that they are instilling into him, he definitely has that in him, and he definitely wants to honor that. But at the same time, he questions that as well. So there's a lot of complexities that's required for this character that he has to be able to convey and express. And I think he does a really good job with all that. And I want to talk about the two actors that play Boogie's parents, Perry Young and Pamela Chi, who both play Mr. and Mrs. Chin. Both of these actors do a phenomenal job in showcasing the approach that both of these parents have on how they want to handle their son's goals and his dreams. Whereas I mentioned before that Boogie's mother is very difficult, and whereas his father is not very difficult. In fact, he's very easygoing. He can talk with him and so on. I think that there's a part of the culture that I personally am not too familiar with. And to see that complexity about how these two individuals are wanting to support their son and how they handle that is extremely important for us to learn that. And I think that both of these actors do a good job in showcasing the approach that they have with the same set of traditional values, and they both come from the same exact background, yet they go about things differently. And despite the tension between them, they're still together, and you can tell that, at least to me, they don't really love each other. And you can see that one parent clearly loves their child, whereas the other parent, you question, do they really love them, or are they just doing it because that's just the way that it is? It's a very complex thing. But at the same time, I want to point out that the actor Perry Young, who plays Mr. Chin, Boogie's father, I became familiar with him through the TV show Warrior. When I saw that show, I loved his performance as Father Jun in the show, because there was a certain quality about his performance that I really gravitated towards. The show is fantastic, so I recommend you guys check that show out if you haven't seen it, because it is a brilliant show, and it's a wonderful show because it does deal with Chinese American history, but at the same time making it very entertaining with a lot of wonderful action sequences in the show. But after I watched his performance in that show, I started to look more into his work and learn more about his background. And I've come to learn that he is a Chinese American, but what was interesting for me was that he is extremely knowledgeable about Chinese American history, but not just here in America, but also other parts around the world too, with Asian history that takes place in all different parts of the world. And he's extremely knowledgeable about that. As a result of that, he's able to portray these characters in the film, especially with Mr. Chin, in an authentic way, because he understands the background, he understands the values, he understands the traditions, and he understands the history. And I think that really showcases here in this performance as Mr. Chin. And that goes the same for Pamela Chi, who plays Boogie's mother. She is a fantastic actress in this movie too, because I've seen this before, not just in the Chinese or Asian communities, but I've seen that in the Hispanic community as well too, where you have parents who approach things differently, yet they want the same thing for their children. So it is definitely a culture thing. There's no doubt about that. And I know that most parents would want the best for their children. How they approach that is based on how they've been raised and what set of values were taught to them. And this offers a unique perspective from the Chinese side of it, which I think was extremely important for us to look into and understand where they're coming from. And I think that's done brilliantly because these two actors do a good job in portraying that and showcasing that complexity. It's brilliant in my opinion. The actress Taylor Page, who plays Eleanor in this movie, Boogie's love interest, she's phenomenal as well. She definitely adds a different element to this story because she gives a different perspective when it comes to the struggles that the African American community has dealt with in this country. That's very similar to the Chinese American history here in this country. And she also challenges Boogie when it comes to his issues that he has with the traditional values that were taught to him by his family, and of course the culture that he's been taught all his life. And at the same time, there was a moment in this movie that made me really believe this relationship felt very authentic. And it deals with an intimate moment where they're both about to have sex, and he is extremely insecure with himself because of the stereotypes of Asian men having small penises. And he even makes a comment to her about how he had measured himself and said that it was above average. And she's like, all right, well, let me see. And then she teases him, and he's like, come on, I'm extremely insecure about this. And he shows that emotional beat of like he's obviously very concerned about this because he really likes this girl, and the last thing he wants to happen is for her to say, oh, I don't want to fuck with you because you got a small dick. That was his concern. And there was an honesty about that and showcasing that in an intimate moment. And that's what I loved about this film, because this particular relationship shows those private moments and the insecurities that comes out in those moments. And I think it was done brilliantly in this film. And then, of course, as the film progresses, the relationship does evolve, and there's some hurdles that they have to come through, overcome as well along the way. But at the end of the day, it's a very honest relationship because it comes from a very real place. And I think both of these actors have a chemistry that works very well, that you can clearly see on screen, and I think they're both fantastic. And the late rapper Pop Smoke plays the character of Monk in this movie, who's the rival to Boogie, and he does a really good job with his performance in this film. There's a certain intimidation factor that's required for this character that he definitely does bring in spades, but there's also a moment of vulnerability that happens in this film where where Monk has a kink in the armor exposed. And I believe that Pop Smokes does a really good job in conveying that particular moment in the film. And the film is dedicated to his honor at the end of the movie. And you can definitely tell that they are truly paying respects and are honoring the legacy of Pop Smoke. And unfortunately, I don't think he ever got a chance to see the final film. I think the extent of what he's able to see were just the playbacks of the things that he was shooting on the day of the set, that he was on the set. But I have no doubt in my mind that if he were to watch this film, that he would have been extremely proud of it. And I got one more positive that I want to point out that I think will be a little controversial, but this has to do with an interview that I saw Eddie had done in promoting this film. And what I appreciate about this interview was that he was very open and honest about it. And what he wanted to point out was the struggles within the Asian community, but at the same time, point out the criticism that he also has about the Asian community that dealt with a lot of the hypocrisies and contradictories that were taught to him about these Asian values. And he had also, I believe, mentioned about his experience with his parents telling him that they love him, they care for him, and that they're only doing these things to him because they love and care for him. So he would question him and say, so you're hitting me because you love me, or you're crushing my dreams of becoming a writer or an entertainer because you love me? And I remember distinctly thinking, oh, I know exactly how that feels, because I used to get hit by my parents a lot when I was a kid. And I don't think I've ever had any conversations like that with my parents where they were crushing my dreams. The only thing I remember that comes close to that was, I think my dad had told me that I can't remember what I told him that I wanted to do when I grew up. And I think I may have told him something to the effect of being an actor or something in the entertainment business. I think there was something like that. But I remember a moment in the conversation where he had said, well, you got to be realistic. And I remember thinking like, wow, that's encouraging. So I just remember those moments in my life growing up as a kid, especially when I was being hit, because I remember at the time I obviously was very scared and I didn't want to go through that, but I remember specifically thinking a sense of abandonment, a betrayal, because I didn't understand why my parents would hit me if they loved me. I just didn't get that. And I also remember distinctly thinking that I would never ever do that to my own children. I would never lay a hand on them or hit them in any way or shape or form, because it never taught me anything. It just taught me at the time to keep to myself. It was a step backwards than it was forward. I never got out of it like, you know what, Mom and Dad, now that you smacked me in my face, and I remember how disrespectful I was to you, and I will honor you and respect you because what you did was right, and that taught me a lesson that I will always honor my parents and respect them no matter what, because you smacking me in the face made me understand that. It just never occurred to me to think that way because it was a polar opposite. So, and the reason I'm pointing this out as a positive is not to point out, these events that I went through in my life, and I don't have a problem bringing that up and talking about it. That's a whole different conversation on its own. And I'm certainly not trying to portray my parents as being bad people, because they're not bad people at all. But what I appreciated was the fact that he was pointing out these flaws within the community, and those same flaws that he saw in the Asian community were the same exact ones that I saw in my own community, the Hispanic community. It was a lot of do as I say, not as I do, and you have to respect and honor your parents. And I was thinking like, holy shit, that's some real talk right there. And he definitely does show that in this movie, and I think it was handled really well, in my opinion, when it comes to pointing out those flaws and having Boogie question these values that were taught to him and how it doesn't make sense to him at all, because he just doesn't understand how my mom, who says she loves me and is looking out for me, but why is she treating me like shit along the way? Like, he didn't understand that, and that's just her way of doing it. Whereas his father, on the other hand, is not doing that. He's very encouraging, talks to his son, listens to his son, and then puts him in a spot when it's absolutely necessary, but in a kind of an embarrassing way at times. And I just remember thinking like, yeah, I know exactly how that feels. I just remember experiencing those moments and being very critical about it, especially now as I get older. There's still a lot of criticisms that I have within my community that I don't appreciate or agree with at all. So that's going to be the end of my positive right there. I hope I didn't end that part on a sour note, but it was important for me to see that because it was something that I think it's very important to point out. And I think Eddie did a great job in showcasing that, in my opinion. But so now this is going to be the perfect segue to get into my negatives. The only real negative that I have about this movie is that it's too short. It's only 90 minutes long, and I always feel like with a story like this, you need more time to spend with the characters and also flesh out the story details. But that's not to say that the character development is not in this movie, because there is character development, or to say that the story is not told effectively, because it is told effectively. It's just that I would have liked to spend more time with these characters in the story. And there are moments in the film where there are certain characters that are introduced that really don't have a lot of time on screen where you can really flesh out their background. Like, for example, the character of Monk, not to say that he's one note, but there are moments in the film where you get to learn about his background that sound very interesting. I wish they would have delved into that more, so that way you can get a full understanding of why he is the way he is and so on. And then, of course, there are other characters that are introduced in this movie that almost appear randomly, but then as the story progresses, it makes sense why they're included into the story. But then at the same time, they're also gone without really any explanation. But that's not to say, again, that the story is not told well. It is. It's just want more time. That's all I really wanted. But outside of that, that's really the only negative that I have about this movie that I can think of at this moment. But this is going to be the perfect segue for me to get into now with my rating. I think this is a great movie. I really like this film a lot. And I took a lot from this movie as well, because there's a lot of things that I did connect with that I personally have experienced in my own personal life that I can relate to, that I saw in the movie. And considering that this is Eddie Huang's very first film that he's written and directed, it's done beautifully, in my opinion. And everyone behind the scenes and in front of the camera do a phenomenal job in putting this film together, because stories like these need to be told, and they need to be heard, need to be seen. And I encourage you guys to go and rent this movie, because it's available on Amazon Prime, on Vudu, whatever digital platform you guys have. I recommend you guys spend money and check this film out, or go out to the theaters and watch it. So it's still in theaters right now. And for me personally, I would say this film is definitely a raise the glass. And those are my thoughts on the film, and I really do hope that this review does encourage you for you to go out of your way to check this movie out, because stories like this need to be told and they need to be seen as well. So I hope you guys do check out the film, and if you do, please let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel, and also make sure you share and like our videos and hit that notification bell down below. And follow us on our social media accounts. We have a Facebook and Instagram page at New Release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at TheNRW. And you can also follow me on my social media accounts. On Instagram, Rob_Medina0585. On Twitter, RobMedina0585. And on Facebook, simply just Rob the Movie Guy. And before I close out this review, I do have an announcement that I want to make. Kuya P. Francis and myself had the opportunity for us to speak with the wonderful actor Mr. Perry Young, who appears in this movie Boogie that I just reviewed, where he played Boogie's father, and he's also in the TV show Warrior, where he plays the character Father June, that's currently streaming on HBO Max right now. If you have not checked out that show, I recommend you check it out ASAP, because that show is awesome. And even if you have seen the show, check it out again, because you know that show is awesome. Plus, we all want to get Warrior Season 3 to come out ASAP. And he was kind enough to give us his time for us to speak with him about his background, his work in the industry, and he's also extremely insightful about Chinese American history, where he did drop some knowledge on us during that interview. And this particular interview will be appearing on the Nerds of Colors YouTube channel. So if you have not subscribed to that channel, I recommend you go over there right now, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too while you're at it. And there's also another interview that he has done on that channel called the Southern Fried Asian Podcast, which is a wonderful episode that he had done with the host Keith, where they go into his history of growing up in the South, particularly in Texas, where Keith is also from as well. And it's a wonderful episode, very, very insightful, and I highly recommend you guys do check that out. And while you're there as well, also check out our boy Kuya P show alongside with Viva Valentina and Catarific with their show, The Show Pal Show. Check that show out, because that show is awesome. They talk with a lot of people of Filipino background in the industry, whether it be in comic books, and films, TVs, or politics. They talk to them all, and it's wonderful, and the information that you gather from these guests that appear in the show, really, really awesome stuff. So I highly recommend you check it out on the Nerds of Colors YouTube channel. And that is all for today, and I hope you guys did enjoy this review. And until next time, everybody, you guys stay safe out there, and cheers.